Uh, so Islamicom, and then we were going through this technique about how to prepare the AG reagent. I think that will be a very sort of a detailed that would be very detailed if we go into much of this or into it word by word. So we'll just skip read most of it, and we have not gone into much about the polyspecific AIG, how the polyspecific AIG contains either antibodies to both to a blend of IgG and anti-C3d component, and then we would go on to also about the monospecific, how they are how they can be made either from hybridoma cell lines, or and they can be active against both the anti-IgG or the anti-complement component. Okay, sorry for the interruption. I'll be um, now for these polyspecific AG um, components, if they have like if we have like these prepared in rabbits, and these can be so we have gone over much of how these polyspecific are created using the using cells using rabbits, a colony of rabbits. So polyspecific are made using a colony of rabbits, whereas the monospecific are used using purified human globulins that is infused into rabbits, and then the lymphocytes are obtained from spleen, which are then hybridized with the myeloma cell lines, and then hybridoma through the hybridoma technology, these specific antibodies are then produced. So this is about the conventional method in which the complement or the IgG is injected into the rabbits, and then then their antibodies are pooled together to form this polyspecific blend. Whereas by the hybridoma technology, the complement containing or the human immunoglobulin are injected, their purified antigens are injected into mice, and then their lymphocytes are collected from the spleen, and then they are fused with myeloma cell lines, which then grow to form just specific cultures of the or specific clones of the of the immunoglobulins or IgG or the anti-C3d. So then the monospecific AIG, this has antibodies required in AHG would then be the need to use both polyspecific and monospecific AHG is of course to detect any sort of either complement being attached, the IgG being attached, or any of the complement products being attached. So now the anti-IgG is is must contain antibody activity to non-agglutinating blood group antibodies, and the majority of these antibodies are a mixture of IgG1 and IG3, IgG3 and IgG1, and rarely non-agglutinating IgM antibodies may be found. So these IgG1 and IgG3, these are the ones that are found in the IgG, anti-IgG AG reagents. And while some antibodies to blood group antigens can have the IgA component also, the only RBC allo antibodies that have been reported as being solely IgA have been examples of anti-PR antibodies. So and these antibodies were agglutinating IgA autoantibodies also. So if we go into this, another IgG subclasses are actually the IgG1, IgG2, IgG3, and IgG4. And of these, only the IgG1, so the monospecific IgG-AHG has the advantage of specificity. But there are limitations or disadvantages noted based on the detection of IgG1 to IgG4 in the reactivity. So in the US also, only the gamma clones detect detecting the IgG1, IgG2, and IgG3 are used, and the packet insert um, but as described as in the packet insert, it fails to react with IgG. Okay, so this is not regarded as a significant limitation since IgG4 only antibody specificities are uncommon. So, and have not been associated with acute hemolytic transfusion reactions and often have high titer, low avidity type features. So, if we go into these antibodies, even the IgG1 to IgG4, so based on these um, based on these specificities, so the anti-CH4 and CH reported to Sandy Shid reported to rarely cause so these are like rare antibodies. I think that may not that may not be detected. So the anti-IgG component of the AHG, this is a mixture of IgG1 and IgG3 subclasses mostly. And IgG2 may also be present, but 4 is often not detected. But since 4 does not cause acute hemolytic transfusion reaction, so we can also omit it, and that would also they are more likely to be active against the IgE antibodies. So the anti-complement part of the AHG, this is able to fix the complement components to the RBC membranes after complexing of the antibody with its corresponding antigen. And these antibodies are listed in table this 5.2. So these are the antibodies that are capable of binding complement. So these would then be mostly the ones that bind the complement are the ABO, Lewis A and B, and JKAB, JKA and B, and then also the CS1, CO3, GE. So I think the most important ones are the ABO, Lewis, and JKA and B. And also then these P antibodies and P1, PK, and well antibodies, these are also capable of binding complement. Mm. I think we'll come up with a mnemonic. I think of remembering this, and I look this up and probably share this also in the group. So those are antibodies that are capable of binding complement. Um, so that we can remember, because blood banking is all basically about mnemonics and remembering the those which are able to cause reactions in certain ways. So we'll probably keep on sharing these as we go along. Some antibodies which have specificity for enzymes, certain enzymes, their activity increases with certain enzymes, and those which are high titer or low titer are high avidity, low avidity antibodies, and also antibodies capable of binding complement. So like this would be a sort of a homework. We go through this, and we'll try to remember this list, which is consists of ABO, Lewis A and B, JK and B, and then also big P and P1, PK, and well antibodies. Just a few that I can remember. And the rest, I think we'll try to come up with um, a mnemonic with it. So so basically most of these antibodies, they are capable of fixing complement, and we know now that the IgG3 and the IgG1 are the ones that will activate the complement mostly. And then out of these, the and then out of these these other blood group and the specific blood group antibodies that are able to bind complement are the ABO, Lewis, JK, P1, PK, and well, and also the garbage and the cobalt and CS1. So during complement activation, so this is like the advanced concept that we'll be doing, that during activation, the C3 splits into two components, the C3b, which binds to the B is the one that remains bound to the RBC membrane. and is opsonic. And this is the one that would be then recognized by macrophages. Whereas the C3A component, it passes into the fluid phase. So whenever there's complement activation, the component which keeps the B component, it's binding to the RBC membrane. Whereas the A complement, it moves into the fluid phase. And additional cofactors further cleave the C3B, releasing C3A into the fluid again, and releasing and further. Now first, the C3 is split into A and B. The A goes into the fluid phase, and the B binds to the membrane. Then when again this is acted upon by C3B convertase, then this releases, there will be release of C3C into the fluid, and the C3DG would be bound to the membrane. And the tissue proteases then rapidly transform the C3DG into C3D. So this is like sort of background knowledge that we need to have for regarding the complements and their activation on the red cell surface. Now the ISBT-ICH joint working party considered anti-C3C, which is the one in the serum, which after the active action of the C3 convertase. So this is the one that would be, they consider that anti-C3C to be the most important anti-complement component because of its limited capacity to cause non-specific reactions. So, however, when RBCs are incubated with serum for longer than 15 minutes, the number of C3C determinants falls rapidly because C3C is split off the C3BI molecule, and this further supports the use of anti-C3D in international reference reagents by the joint working group. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that we do like we have the C3A and the B, but the B is since going to be further cleaved, so we do not use mostly for and complement anti-complementary reagents specific for the C3B. So the next in line would be the C3C and the C3D. Now, of these, the C3C is an important anti-complementary reaction because it is important because of its limited capacity to cause non-specific reaction. Then it is just specific to the RBC because this is the second time that this C3 component bound to the RBC would now be cleaved. So this will be very specific for the RBC reaction. But but since it is if the serum is like allowed to stand for if the RBCs are incubated in serum for longer than 15 minutes, then the C3C can also become it can split off into the C3BI molecule. So because of this very short window period to detect the C3C, most of international reagents, they still use the anti-C3D, which is still bound to the RBCs as the international reference agent. The final degradation step has been shown to occur in vivo and is a common occurrence in both warm and cold autoimmune hemolytic anemias. So the degradation of C3B to C3D can occur in vitro even. So providing that the incubation period is greater than 1 hour. So this is why we actually, when we go for the reactions also, we first have this immediate spin reaction, which will of course detect the IgM antibodies, which can cause rapid agglutination and visible reaction in the immediate spin phase. Then we go for 35 room temperature incubation period of this is like without addition of any pro-agglutinating complements like reagents like the LIS or the albumin or the bovine serum bovine albumin or LIS or PEG. Without these agglutinating reagents, if the test tube is in itself to be detected for IgG activation, then this IgG can if any reaction is to be detected, then the complement would actually show reaction if the incubation period is greater than 1 hour. Then the C3B would be converted to C3D, and then the AIG reagent, which has the anti-C3D activity, would be able to detect the C3D bound on that on the RBC membrane. They also confirmed that the observation that given sufficient time, cell-bound C3B could be degraded to C3D in vitro. So, so this reaction can occur in vitro, and that is why this incubation period of 1 hour is also there. So in the immediate spin, we can detect the IgM antibodies, and this incubation of the reagents for 1 hour without any agglutinating complement, or basically this incubation room temperature is there to allow the C3D, C3B to be degraded to C3D, and then the AIG reagent, which has this anti-C3D activity, can detect it. So the polyspecific, polyspecific versus monospecific AIG is the main function is that the polyspecific AIG contains both the anti-IgG activity and anti-C3D activity. Of course, that's why it would be polyspecific, and so there's considerable debate amongst blood bankers over the use of monospecific IgG versus polyspecific IgG. So AIG for routine antibody detection and pre-transfusion testing, because most clinically significant antibodies detected during antibody screening are IgG. So since most are IgG, the most important function of polyspecific AIG is the detection of IgG antibodies. And there have been numerous reports of clinically significant RBC alloantibodies that were undetected with monospecific anti-IgG, but were detected with anti-complement component of AIG. So we can, therefore there is still debate as to, because these IgG antibodies are the ones that we should not miss, and they are clinically significant. So we need to detect them. And for detection of this, now there's debate as to whether we should use these polyspecific, these monospecific anti-IgG, or the polyspecific AHG. So whether we should use the polyspecific anti-human globulin that would contain both the anti-IgG and anti-C3D, or we use monospecific anti-IgG. This is still, there are still competing reports as to what should be done. And there have been numerous reports of the clinical significance of antibodies that are detected with the monospecific anti-IgG, but the polyspecific AIG, it can detect because this polyspecific AIG, now since it contains both the IgG component and the complement component also, so it would be detecting a wide variety of IgG, like mostly the C3D, the IgG3 and C1, IgG3 and IgG1, which can cause complement activation. They would be giving a much better reaction with the polyspecific ones, which have the complement component also. So polyspecific AIG has been associated with unwanted positive reactions. That is why it is this is the only disadvantage of the polyspecific AIG, that it not only detects the IgG, but since it also has the anti-C3D component, so it would detect when many unwanted positive reactions that are not caused by clinically significant antibodies. Because in the blood bank, we want that whenever a reaction occurs, it occurs for a clinically significant antibody, that the reaction strength should be enough to detect clinically significant antibodies. And then we also want that then we also want that the non-specific positive reactions are not, that we do not need to deal with non-specific positive reactions. So using polyspecific AIG has this disadvantage, that although when that is, it would not be, there would be no that whenever reaction is positive, basically it could be a false positive as well, because it would be kind of over detecting all those antibodies, and there would be unwanted positive reactions. However, a negative would be still a negative. A negative would probably show that there is no antibody. So it has this negative predictive value, but the positive reactions would need to be worked up whether they are clinically significant or not. So because of this, to investigate these variables, we do have this. We have the monospecific IgG, and this monospecific IgG, which is just added against the IgG component. These were compared, and they found that they also compared the albumin technique with the low ionic strength suspended RBCs. So 4 JK antibodies were detected only with polyspecific anti-IgG, and these JK antibodies are actually the ones which are the most tricky, because these kid antibodies, they can cause reactions both in the IgG and the IgM. Basically, they can cause a variety of reactions, and they can be very hard to detect. So these antibodies were detected only with polyspecific anti-IgG using albumin or less suspended RBCs. Now, this is probably an important thing that we need to remember, that these JK antibodies, they are very sometimes difficult to detect even, and they can be detected only with polyspecific anti-IgG using albumin or less suspended RBCs. So we would need to detect these JKA antibodies. We need polyspecific AHG reagents, which have the anti-IgG plus the anti-C3D component. Also, there would be polyspecific anti-IgG is to be used, and then also we would need to incubate the RBCs with the LIS and or albumin. So as to highlight these the IgG component. An additional anti-JKA was detected only with polyspecific AHG when using LIS, but not with albumin. So even amongst LIS and albumin, even there would be some antibodies that would show specificity for one reagent even. So if you get a reaction with a polyspecific, if you get a reaction with a polyspecific AHG, and then you repeat it with and on repeating, sometimes the antibody disappears. So these antibodies are most likely these JKA antibodies, because they could give a reaction with the one reagent, that is they could give a reaction with LIS but not with albumin, or they could give reaction with both LIS and albumin, and then they could be missed out because of using uh, monospecific antibodies. So also 4 antibodies of the anti-K and JKA and Duffy specificity were detected when using LIS but not albumin, with both polyclonal and so these results concluded that some clinically significant antibodies also, so these K Duffy and KL antibodies, they are clinically significant, and even these antibodies can be they can show some varying specificities, and they are detected with the anti-complement component of the AHG, but not with the anti-IgG. So this goes in favor of using polyspecific AHG reagents, because these KID, Duffy, and anti-K, so JKA, FIA, and anti-K antibodies, most these antibodies which are clinically significant, they can have varying reactions with when using polyspecific versus monospecific reagents. So the polyspecific reagents, which has both the IgG and the anti-complement component, they are able to detect these sort of tricky antibodies better. And they would also have differences between when using LIS or albumin. Some may show reactivity with LIS, but not with albumin. So this is also some point that we need to consider when we are actually repeating tests, and sometimes an antibody is coming positive in one reaction, and then it suddenly disappears in the other reactions. So a complement binding IgG antibody often associated, so these anti-JKA also, they are uh, they the true anti-JKA, these anti-JKA, they are complement binding IgG antibodies, and they are often associated with delayed hemolytic transfusion reactions. So Betts and others also determined the number of false positive reactions obtained when using polyspecific AHG. So uh, with the LIS and albumin, and the false positive reactions were defined as those caused by antibodies that were not defined with no definable specificity, or by antibodies considered to be clinically insignificant because of optimum reactivity at cold temperatures. So these anti-IH, P1, and M. Of the unwanted positive reactions, most of them were caused by C3 on the cells. So the authors emphasize that if the first step in evaluating a weakly positive AHG reaction is to repeat using the pre-warm technique, um, about 60% of the false positive reactions, they become negative. So this is also like one um, fact that we can use in the blood banks. That is, when an antibody is like sometimes it is positive in with LIS and not with albumin, and positive with the polyspecific and not with the monospecific reagents. So these could be anti-JKA, FIA, and anti-big K. And and these would be clinically significant, but also and we could go on to detect them in the anti body screening and identification panels. But if they do not come out positive in those panels, and we still then we still have these we consider these reactions to be false positives. So of these also, then the these IgM another sort of a hack that we can use is to use the pre-warm technique. So all those clinically insignificant antibodies that react at cold temperatures, they would then be uh, we would about much of much of those reactions, positive weak, false positive weak reactions, would then become negative. So that these would also show that the antibody that we are detecting, that we think is an antibody that is detected in the LIS or the albumin phase and coming out positive, was actually a weak cold reacting antibody, not insignificant antibody, cold reactive, and it could be IgI HP1 and M. And some of them could be detected using homozygous JKA cells or JKB cells. So another approach would be that we could use the if we consider them to have anti-JKA or anti-JKB specificity, we could use antibody identification panels with homozygous JKA or JKB cells and an AHG reagent containing only anti-IgG activity. So that the IgM component is um, so that we are able to differentiate between those which have an anti-IgM activity and are giving false positive reactions. So two of the anti-JKA antibodies were associated with delayed hemolytic transfusion reactions, and the complement-only KID antibodies, so they represented 23% of all KID antibodies detected during the study. And so they have shown that the use of that is the one reason why polyspecific AIG reagents are still continued to be used for routine compatibility testing, because most of these JKA, KID, and the FI, even FIA antibodies, they can give reactions in the because they would give better reactions if both the IgG and the anti-complement portion is there also. So one must balance the advantage of detecting clinically significant complement-only antibodies. Since most of these KID antibodies could only be directed against complement, most of the JK antibodies may also be directed only against the complement. So having a polyspecific reagent is then beneficial. So deciding to use the AIG reagent for indirect test is the prerogative of the individual blood bank. So whether they use this polyspecific reagent in routine practice, or they use it only to uh, whether they use it only to sort of work out certain tricky cases is the prerogative of the blood bank in itself. So and this is and so all this story actually boils down to the fact that we now know that most of the JKAs and the anti-JKA antibodies are the one most notorious for causing many of these uh, blood banking headaches. So when antibodies, they show reactions to certain reagents and not on repeating the other reagents, one would be either to use a pre-warm technique to sort of uh, do away with the false positive weak reactions due to clinically insignificant cold antibodies, and then we could substitute LIS with albumin and see if they have some specificity for the reagent in itself, that is there's some non-specific reagent containing antibodies are causing reactions. And then another would be that we could use homozygous JKA or JKB cells in the identification panel to specifically rule out these JKA antibodies. And then the monospecific IgG versus the polyspecific IgG would also then help to detect that these are anti-complement antibodies. So now the principle of the antiglobulin test is it detects the antibody molecule and the complement components. And so the antibody and the complement both are the globulins, and the injecting an animal with human globulin stimulates the animal to produce antibodies to the foreign protein, and this serological test employs a variety of AIG reagents. There could be human globulins, anti-IgG, or there could be antibodies to C3D component of the human complement, and polyspecific reagents that contain both anti-IgG and anti-C3D activity. So the AIG that reacts with the human globulin molecule